Picture a military order so powerful they didn't just win battles, they forged an empire. In the frozen lands of Northern Europe, where winter winds howled across vast forests and icy shores, arose one of history's most formidable forces, the Teutonic Knights. These weren't your ordinary warriors. They were monk soldiers who built mighty castles, founded great cities, and shaped the destiny of entire nations. Imagine yourself in the late 1200s. While the deserts of the Holy Land drew crusaders from across Europe, another religious war was brewing in the north, a war that would change the face of Eastern Europe forever. Born in 1190 during the siege of Acre, the Teutonic Knights would find their true calling far from the scorching sands of the Middle East. These warrior monks, clad in their iconic white cloaks adorned with black crosses, answered a different call: to bring Christianity to the pagan lands of the Baltic by sword and fire if necessary. What began as a small hospital order in the Holy Land would grow into an unstoppable force that ruled an empire stretching from Prussia to Estonia. Their story is one of incredible ambition, brutal conquest, and lasting legacy. They built magnificent castles that still stand today, like the mighty Malbork Fortress, the largest brick castle in the world. They founded cities that would become powerhouses of trade and culture, like Königsberg and Marienburg. But their tale is also one of hubris, as their power grew too great and their enemies too numerous. Are you ready to uncover the epic saga of these warrior monks who shaped the destiny of Northern Europe? Join us as we delve into the remarkable story of the Teutonic Knights, from their humble beginnings to their rise as one of medieval Europe's most powerful military orders. Hit that subscribe button and join the medieval archives to explore more fascinating stories from the Middle Ages. Ring that notification bell, because this is one historical journey you won't want to miss. Now let's march into the frozen north and discover how a band of warrior monks built an empire. The story of the Teutonic Knights begins not with a clash of swords, but with an act of mercy. In 1190, during the Third Crusade, a group of German merchants and noblemen witnessed the suffering of their fellow Crusaders outside the walls of Acre. Under the scorching Middle Eastern sun, they established a field hospital to care for the wounded and sick. Little did they know this humble beginning would give rise to one of the most powerful military orders in history. But healing the sick was just the beginning. By 1198, these German hospitallers had transformed themselves into something far more formidable. Taking inspiration from the famous Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, they forged themselves into a military order. Pope Innocent III himself blessed their transformation, and the Teutonic Knights were officially born. Here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. While other crusading orders focused on defending the Holy Land, the Teutonic Knights found their true calling in the frozen north. The Pope and the Holy Roman Empire had a different mission in mind for these warrior monks: to bring Christianity to the pagan tribes of the Baltic region by any means necessary. Now let me tell you something incredible about these knights. They lived by some of the strictest rules imaginable. Every Teutonic knight took solemn vows of poverty, obedience, and complete celibacy. Imagine that. These men weren't just fierce warriors. They were also devoted monks who spent hours in prayer when they weren't wielding their swords. Their distinctive appearance became legendary across medieval Europe. Picture this: a warrior clad in pure white armor and robes, marked with a stark black cross. This wasn't just for show. It was a powerful symbol that struck fear into their enemies and inspiration into their allies. In fact, this iconic design was so powerful that it influenced military uniforms for centuries to come. If you look at some German military decorations from the 19th and early 20th centuries, you can still see echoes of that ancient Teutonic design. The knights followed a rigorous daily routine that would exhaust most modern soldiers. They would rise before dawn for prayers, train in combat for hours, attend religious services, and still find time to manage their vast territories. They were truly warrior monks in every sense, equally comfortable wielding a sword in battle or kneeling in quiet prayer in their chapel. This unique combination of military might and religious devotion would soon transform a humble hospital order into one of medieval Europe's most formidable forces, setting the stage for centuries of conquest and crusade in the Baltic lands. The 13th century saw the beginning of one of the most ambitious and brutal military campaigns in medieval history. The Teutonic Knights set their sights on Prussia, a vast land of dense forests, deep lakes, and fierce pagan tribes. This wasn't just a military conquest, it was a complete transformation of an entire region that would reshape the map of Europe forever. The Knights had a brilliant strategy. Instead of simply raiding and plundering like typical armies of their time, they built massive stone castles as they advanced. These weren't just military fortresses, they were entire communities. Each castle became a center of power, trade, and Christian conversion. Think of it as a medieval version of establishing forward operating bases, but these bases grew into towns and cities that still exist today. The Teutonic Knights also proved themselves masters of medieval propaganda. They portrayed their campaign as a holy mission to bring Christianity to the pagans, attracting nobles and warriors from across Europe who sought glory and spiritual redemption. They called these campaigns crusade seasons, basically medieval military tourism, where European knights would join the Teutonic Order for a summer of fighting against the pagans. But the native Prussians didn't simply bow down to these invaders. They fought back with everything they had. These people knew their lands intimately, every forest path, every frozen marsh, every hidden crossing. They launched guerrilla attacks against the knights, melting away into the thick forests before the heavily armored Crusaders could respond. One of the most dramatic battles took place at Rudau in 1370. Picture this: a winter battlefield. The ground frozen solid, thousands of warriors facing each other with steam rising from their breath in the cold air. The knights won this battle, but at a terrible cost. The Prussian warriors proved that even the mighty Teutonic Order wasn't invincible. They fought with such ferocity that many of the knights' best warriors fell that day. Here's something fascinating about the Prussian resistance. They adapted to fight the knights on their own terms. They learned to use similar weapons and tactics, but combined them with their intimate knowledge of the terrain. They would attack during spring thaws, when the knights' heavy horses would get bogged down in the mud, or launch raids during the harsh Baltic winters, when the knights' supply lines were stretched thin. The knights responded by bringing in German settlers, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants to colonize the conquered lands. They built not just castles, but entire cities like Königsberg and Marienburg. These new settlements changed the very character of Prussia, creating a unique blend of German and Baltic culture that would influence the region for centuries to come. This wasn't just a conquest. It was a complete cultural transformation that would shape the future of Northern Europe. The Teutonic Knights weren't just fighting battles. They were building a new society, one castle, one city, one convert at a time. The year 1410 would witness one of the largest and most decisive battles of the Middle Ages, a clash that would forever change the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The Battle of Grunwald wasn't just another medieval skirmish. It was the moment when an empire of warrior monks met their match. Picture a vast field on a sweltering July morning. On one side stood the mighty Teutonic Knights, their white cloaks and black crosses gleaming in the summer sun, backed by knights from across Western Europe. On the other, an enormous combined force of Polish and Lithuanian warriors led by King Vladislav II Jagiello, alongside Bohemian mercenaries, Russian allies, and even Mongol light cavalry. This was truly a clash of civilizations. The battle began with a fascinating piece of psychological warfare. The Polish-Lithuanian army deliberately delayed their arrival on the battlefield, forcing the knights to wait for hours in the scorching summer heat, wearing their heavy armor. By the time the battle began, many Teutonic Knights were already exhausted. What followed was nothing short of epic. More than 50,000 warriors clashed on that fateful field. The sound of steel meeting steel, the thunder of cavalry charges, the war cries in a dozen different languages filled the air. The fighting was so intense that knights from both sides had to remove their armor to avoid collapsing from heat exhaustion. Here's a detail that few people know. During the battle, the Teutonic Knights actually captured King Vladislav's camp and began celebrating their victory by singing the hymn, "Christ has risen." But their celebration was premature. The Polish forces regrouped and launched a devastating counterattack. By day's end, the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order himself, Ulrich von Jungingen, lay dead on the field alongside hundreds of his best knights. The defeat at Grunwald shattered the myth of Teutonic invincibility. The Order lost not only their best warriors, but also their aura of divine blessing. Think about it. How could God's chosen warriors suffer such a devastating defeat? This question haunted the Order and undermined their authority throughout their remaining territories. The battle changed everything. The Order never fully recovered their former glory. While they remained powerful for some time, Grunwald marked the beginning of their long decline, from mighty warrior monks to a shadow of their former selves. Speaking of warrior monks, isn't it fascinating how these men balanced their roles as both religious devotees and fearsome fighters? If you're enjoying this journey through medieval history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Medieval Archives. We've got plenty more incredible stories from the Middle Ages coming your way. And here's something I'd love to know from you. What's your favorite medieval battle? Was it the cavalry charge at Hastings, the siege of Constantinople, or maybe this epic clash at Grunwald? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Imagine a state ruled not by kings or nobles, but by warrior monks. The Teutonic Order created something truly unique in medieval Europe, a monastic state that combined religious fervor with ruthless efficiency. This wasn't just a territory. It was an experiment in governance that would shape the future of Northern Europe. From their magnificent capital at Marienburg Castle, the largest brick fortress in the medieval world, the Order ran their domain like a medieval corporation. They had departments for everything: treasury, diplomacy, military affairs, even international trade. Think of it as a medieval version of a modern government, but with monks in charge of every department. Here's something fascinating. The Teutonic Knights created one of Europe's first standardized currencies. Their coins were so widely trusted that merchants from as far as Venice and London would accept them without question. They established trading posts, regulated commerce, and even created a sophisticated postal system centuries before most European kingdoms had anything similar. The Order's state was incredibly advanced for its time. They kept detailed records of everything, from military expenses to grain harvests. Their bureaucracy was so efficient that they could mobilize armies and collect taxes with a speed that amazed their contemporaries. They even established schools and hospitals throughout their territory. Though these primarily served the German-speaking population they brought in as settlers. But there was a dark side to this efficiency. The Teutonic Knights ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Native Prussians faced strict regulations on everything from where they could live to what they could wear. They were forbidden from entering certain professions and were often treated as second-class citizens in their own land. Life under the Order's rule was a study in contrasts. For German merchants and settlers, the Teutonic state was a land of opportunity, with well-maintained roads, secure cities, and thriving trade. But for the native population, it was a system of oppression masked by religious authority. This tension led to numerous revolts, including the famous Prussian uprising of 1242, where native tribes nearly succeeded in driving out the Order entirely. The knights responded to these challenges with typical thoroughness. They built an extensive network of castles and fortifications, not just for military defense, but as administrative centers to maintain control over their territory. These castles weren't just military strongholds. They were symbols of power, administrative centers, and economic hubs all rolled into one. Here's an interesting detail. The Order's state was so well organized that they even had environmental regulations. They protected certain forests, regulated hunting, and managed their resources with remarkable foresight. They understood that their power depended not just on military might, but on careful management of their territory's resources. This unusual experiment in monastic governance created a legacy that would influence Prussia and later Germany for centuries to come. The emphasis on efficiency, strict hierarchy, and thorough record-keeping became hallmarks of Prussian administration long after the Order's power had faded. In many ways, the Teutonic Knights created not just a state, but a template for modern governance, even if their methods would be considered harsh by today's standards. The legacy of the Teutonic Knights echoes through time, far beyond their military conquests. What began as a band of warrior monks transformed the very fabric of Northern Europe, leaving marks that persist to this day. Let me take you through this fascinating journey of their enduring influence. Think about this. Many of the great cities you might visit in the Baltic region today were founded by these medieval warrior monks. Take Königsberg, now known as Kaliningrad. This wasn't just another medieval town. It became one of the most important cultural and intellectual centers of Europe. The great philosopher Immanuel Kant spent his entire life there, never traveling more than 40 miles from its walls. The Teutonic Knights were master builders and administrators. The cities they founded followed a distinctive pattern: wide streets, impressive churches, and strong defensive walls. From Marienburg, now called Malbork in Poland, to Riga in Latvia, their architectural fingerprint remains visible. In fact, Malbork Castle, their former headquarters, still stands as the largest brick castle in the world, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, but their influence runs deeper than stone and mortar. The Knights introduced advanced administrative systems that became the foundation for Prussian bureaucratic efficiency. They standardized laws, established organized record-keeping, and created sophisticated economic systems. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of modern city planners and civil servants, but with swords and armor. Here's something fascinating. The iconic Black Cross of the Teutonic Knights influenced military symbols for centuries. The Iron Cross, one of the most famous military decorations in history, was directly inspired by their emblem. Even today, you can see their influence in various military insignias across Europe. The Order's legacy took an unexpected turn after their military power waned. Rather than fade into history, they reinvented themselves. Today, the Teutonic Order still exists, but with a mission that would probably surprise their medieval predecessors. They've transformed into a charitable organization, focusing on helping others through medical care and community service. In a way, returning to their original roots as a hospital order in the Holy Land. Speaking of transformation, the regions once ruled by the Knights developed unique cultural identities. The mix of German and Baltic influences they created gave birth to distinct local cultures. The Prussian virtues of discipline, efficiency, and orderliness, qualities that later became stereotypically associated with German culture, can be traced back to the Teutonic state. But perhaps their most intriguing legacy is how they've been remembered through history. To some, they were brave crusaders bringing civilization to the pagan wilderness. To others, they were foreign invaders who destroyed ancient Baltic cultures. This dual legacy continues to spark heated debates among historians even today. In an ironic twist of fate, many of the castles built by these warrior monks now serve as museums and cultural centers, preserving not just their own history, but also the very Baltic and Slavic cultures they once sought to transform. Their mighty fortresses, once symbols of military power, now stand as bridges between past and present, between different cultures and peoples. The Teutonic Knights remind us how profoundly a single organization can shape the course of history. From the cities we walk through to the very way governments organize themselves, their influence continues to resonate across the centuries, long after their swords were sheathed and their armies disbanded. Their story holds an important lesson. Empires may fall, but culture, architecture, and ideas endure. The Teutonic Knights may have lost their military might, but they won something perhaps more lasting, a permanent place in the tapestry of European history and culture. As our journey through the remarkable saga of the Teutonic Knights comes to an end, we're left with a complex legacy that challenges our understanding of medieval history. These warrior monks, who carved out an empire from the frozen Baltic shores, were truly one of the most fascinating forces of the Middle Ages. Think about it. They began as humble hospital workers in the Holy Land and transformed into one of medieval Europe's most powerful military orders. They built magnificent castles that still captivate us today, founded cities that grew into major centers of trade and culture, and created systems of governance that would influence European politics for centuries to come. But their story also forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about religious warfare and cultural destruction. While they brought written language, stone architecture, and advanced administration to the Baltic regions, they did so at a terrible cost. Entire cultures were forever changed, ancient traditions were lost, and countless lives were sacrificed in the name of religious conversion. The Teutonic Knights embody a fascinating paradox. They were monks dedicated to Christian charity, yet they waged some of the most brutal campaigns in medieval history. They were brilliant administrators who built prosperous cities, yet they oppressed the very people they claimed to civilize. They created magnificent works of architecture and art, yet their fortresses were built on foundations of conquest and subjugation. Their story raises questions that still resonate today. Can violence ever truly serve a higher purpose? What price is too high for progress? Where do we draw the line between civilization and oppression? When we look at the mighty walls of Malbec Castle or walk the streets of cities they founded, should we see monuments to human achievement or reminders of cultural devastation? So I turn this question to you, our wonderful medieval archives community. Were the Teutonic Knights heroes who brought progress and civilization to the Baltic, or were they villains who destroyed ancient cultures in the name of faith? Perhaps they were both, a reminder that history rarely gives us simple answers to complex questions. This is what makes medieval history so fascinating. It challenges us to think deeply about human nature, power, faith, and the complex legacies we leave behind. Each story we uncover, each castle we explore, each battle we reconstruct helps us better understand not just the past, but ourselves. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most intriguing military orders, why not join our growing community of history enthusiasts? Hit that subscribe button to become part of the Medieval Archives family. Ring that notification bell to ensure you never miss our upcoming episodes about other fascinating medieval mysteries, from the secrets of castle warfare to the hidden lives of medieval peasants. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm particularly curious, which aspect of the Teutonic Knights story surprised you the most? What other medieval mysteries would you like us to explore in future episodes? Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through time. Until our next historical adventure, remember that the past is never simply black and white. It's filled with fascinating shades of grey that continue to challenge and inspire us today. See you in our next medieval exploration.